Hello, everyone. Welcome to InteropChat, where we break down the latest developments in healthcare interoperability and what it means for healthcare organizations, providers, and patients. I'm Dave Cassel, SVP of Interoperability at Innovaccer, and I'm joined by Ryan Howells, Principal at Leavitt Partners, my apologies, Deven McGraw, Chief Regulatory Officer at Citizen Health, and Dr. Stephen Lane, Chief Medical Officer at Health Gorilla. Let's go ahead and get started. So first off, since this group last got together, CMS has been very busy, and they were busy before our previous conversation. Also, it's generally been a busy time at CMS. I think it's fair to say that of all their activities, the greatest potential impact for interoperability seems to be the Interop framework that was announced at a White House event a few weeks ago. Ryan, you're up first. Can you give a quick summary of the framework from your perspective, and then share maybe what most excites you about it, most worries you about it? I'll leave it up to you as to exactly where you take it after the summary.
Thanks, Dave. Good to be here with all you friends. It's awesome. Just some background on me. I first time I've been on InteropChat, so I'm excited to do that. Long time listener, first time caller. Is that how they say it on the what's going on? Which is we pulled together multi-stakeholder alliances to try to solve difficult issues in healthcare. We started the Karen Alliance back in 2016 to get patients more individual access to their healthcare data, and have been working on that with Deven and Steve and Dave for almost 10 years now, if you could believe it. I cannot believe it's been almost 10 years, but we've been trying to do that. And we are very close to getting that actually working nationwide. In fact, it is working in a few different areas, but not holistically yet. And so we'll see where that goes. And then we wrote a paper called Kill the Clipboard back in March, Leavitt Partners did. And then the government decided to usurp the name and call it that initiative, which was interesting, and use a lot of the same ideas, which was great. They weren't our ideas. They were just ideas from the industry that we've been wanting to do for a long, long time. And we've just been looking for an administration that wanted to do it. So, Dave, the first thing I think is just understanding where we are. One of the things that we had said in our Kill the Clipboard webinar we did a few weeks ago, Anish and I did, is there's only been 3 times in the last 25 years when the White House, ONC, HHS, and CMS were fully aligned on digital health and interoperability initiatives. One was under President Bush in creating ONC in the first place. One was under President Obama when Anish was in the White House and they were implementing high tech. And the other is now. And we've never had like this much alignment in terms of priorities that we do now. So we've got like 3.5 years to try to fix all this stuff. And then, God forbid, we have to wait another 10 years until before it's a priority again across the entire administration. Because as we speak to the administration officials and career people that have been there for a long time, they're like, yeah, we've been wanting to fix it for a long time too, but we don't necessarily have the political cover to fix it. So now they have full political alignment. And that's important because they can do a lot more interesting things that way. And then the private sector gets aligned too. So, but what they're doing, Dave, what's really important is we've never done this before. Okay. Usually what happens is the private sector works in ballrooms at HL7 connectathons, develops standards and prays and hopes that people will adopt them, right? That's one approach. The second approach is the government says, nope, this is what we're going to do. Here's the regulation, comment on it, finalize it, and then go get it in production in the next 2 to 3 years. Well, both of them are taking a kind of a significantly different approach to this, to what we're doing now, which is a collaborative effort. And I want to be clear in the word collaborative. By law, you can't give advice to the federal government about what to do. That's called a FHIR, and that's not what this is. What we're doing is they have created these work groups, Dave, and these work groups are actually being collaborative, meaning they're trying to solve the problem in real time on a Slack channel. Like that's what they're doing. And the government is there. And some of them are weighing in saying, have you thought about this? Or what does this look like? Or what is this thing? That's really new. This is very interesting. And they're not going to do it with regulation, according to what they've said. Now I'm going to talk about what they said here in a second, but that is like what they are doing. Now the question becomes, how well is that going to work, and how well is that going to scale? Those are the big two questions, right? Because we know the only thing that really scales in healthcare is federal policy, right? Like that's the real thing that scales. So, and even that you could argue may not scale the way that we need it to. But the concept, we still need the private sector to get aligned, and we still need the public sector to get aligned. So how do we best do that? This is a brand new form. So what was in the announcement? I'm sure most folks have read it by now. I think the big takeaways for me were a few things. Number one, get to FHIR immediately. FHIR APIs, like get there immediately. And we're not waiting. I mean, they were very clear in the announcement. We're done waiting. Now, TEFCA right now is like Care Quality 2.0, Dave, that you know really well, which is CCDA-based data exchange, and it's a little bit more structured and it's more oversight. The federal government's in the room, and we've improved for sure on Care Quality 1.0 because we've learned a lot, right? They've just learned a lot. We're applying all those things, which is awesome, and we're doing some more work, but it's not FHIR related yet. So what this is saying is, while that's starting, continuing to go on, the second piece is, can we get to FHIR faster? Meaning, if CMS published a FHIR endpoint directory and a provider and payer directory, which is their plan, then can they just start exchanging FHIR-based APIs with each other using the existing data use agreements they already have? And the answer that we've heard from numerous payers and even health systems is yes. Like, just give us the directory, tell us where to go. We will use existing data use agreements and we'll just start doing point to point. Now, that is not the vision and the goals of TEFCA. Eventually, that's going to happen where you can do a single connection and scale. This is different. This is, let's just get FHIR up and running in production to B2B, and then let's figure out a way where we can scale it across the whole country. So that's one thing interesting. Second thing is obviously digital identity. As this group knows, it's like my favorite topic, and it's been my favorite topic for a long time. And it's the only way that we're going to know three things. Are you who you say you are? What organization or individual do you represent? And what data are you authorized to receive? We can't answer those three questions. None of the other stuff matters, by the way. And then the last thing I'm excited about is the round trip back into the EHR. So it talks about the fact that you can use a smart health card or smart health link that could actually then get sent back into the EHR. And without kind of going into all the detail right now, we wrote the smart health card, smart health link standard. And the cool thing I'm excited about is the fact that it was written with Josh Mandel and others for you to have cryptographically signed FHIR payload data, which means if the data goes from B2B, from payer to provider or provider to provider, whatever they do, or if the data goes from provider to the patient back to the provider, it will be cryptographically signed from the source. So I will know the data came from Johns Hopkins, even if it went to the patient first and it went back to the next University of Maryland second. That solves the data provenance issue, and it allows the data to go directly into the EHR database rather than actually going into a smart on FHIR construct that's not actually in the workflow. So I'll pause there, Dave, but like those are the things that kind of get me excited about it.
Excellent. Great summary, and thanks for all that background and detail. There's obviously an awful lot to react to there. Um, yeah, I'll maybe start with this angle, and I'm supportive of this effort, to be clear, and so I'm playing devil's advocate here a little bit. If what we're really enabling is point-to-point FHIR connections using existing data use agreements, and the big add is truly a directory, that seems a little bit like limited value to me, because specifically if you're doing point-to-point connections, there's a limited number of them. Theoretically, you've got these separate data use agreements. Compared to doing a data use agreement, having somebody tell you what their endpoint is a small thing. So where is the real value that's being added here? Why hasn't this happened without this initiative? What is this initiative going to really do, kind of in more of maybe like a soft power, harder to describe way to make this a reality?
Yeah, let me just clarify, Dave, and then I'll allow others to respond to this. I just to my point, initially not long term. So what I'm saying is we don't have FHIR in production B2B anywhere today other than a few random spots. So the idea is, how do you get FHIR in production for B2B today? And then how do you scale it so that it's not just point to point, but it could be connect once and then be able to federate it like a TEFCA framework. That's what I think the intent is, at least the way that I read it. But I'll let Deven and Steven react to that.
I mean, I'll react. I think just intuitively, you have to move something, right? When there's a log jam, you have to move a log. And this is incredible, right? This would get real world experience moving the data between partners who are already sharing. And once we break that dam and get that moving, I think then we will see the TEFCA or other frameworks move in response because they're saying, well, it's happening. Look, all the water is going over there. Let's reconfigure our system. I may be pushing this metaphor a bit so that we can move it through, the framework as we've designed it. I think, we've all been frustrated by the slow pace of advancement in the national frameworks, whether it's care quality, TEFCA, they each kind of improve on the other. But I loved it when Steve Posnack showed up at I think it was an ASTP presentation or maybe a Sequoia presentation and said that he sees the CMS framework as what we're trying to accomplish, and he sees TEFCA as how we're going to end up supporting it at scale. And what we need to do is keep moving both forward so that we get that positive feedback loop that will hopefully allow us to make the progress you were describing, Ryan.
I think to me, the real value of the CMS interoperability framework is not that it's a replacement for all these other interoperability efforts that we have going on, but that it is a bunch of people who have signed a pledge to do things in interoperability, very specific things by a very steep deadline. By the end of the first quarter, or first quarter 2026. I'll let you all decide whether that means beginning of Q1 or end of Q1. But it's basically like all these log jams that Stephen was talking about. It is taking through this consensus process a very long time to resolve them. What you have is a group of people who are leaning in and saying, we are ready. We're ready to do this. Not to continue to sit around and talk about how we do it, but to actually do it and to then be the examples of how it can be done so that that can be taken back to these networks and scaled. We just get stuck trying to come to consensus with a wide group of stakeholders, not all of whom agree about how this is happening, and the wheels are turning agonizingly slowly. And I think CMS, the administration said we have an opportunity to try to bring a group of doers together to escalate this, and we're going to do it. And it'll be really interesting to see how much are people leaning in. Did they sign the pledge in order to be part of whatever the thing is, or are they really going to roll up their sleeves and say, okay, we're going to do this with their, conservative legal counsel in tow going, okay, well, this isn't, I see risk here, but I think we can make this work because, part of the great leap in interoperability that we need to facilitate needs to take people past their comfort zones, right? We're not talking about facilitating exchange for anything that's not legal, but there's 1,000, but what abouts? What about this? And what about that? And how do we know it's the patient? And how do we know this consent is accurate? And how do we know, that it's the right record, even though we only got one match from the query? How do we take patients out of the portalitis environment where they're having to log into every single portal in order to get their data? And how can we sort of get people out of their comfort zones a little bit? And it's one of the reasons why I'm excited is that there's a cadre of organizations, which seems to be growing by the day, who are saying, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm not just going to sit around and talk about it. I'm not just going to join another committee. With all due respect to committees, I'm on several of them, right? We spend a lot of time talking and not as much time doing. This is a group of doers. I know that's why we signed 2 pledges, because we're ready to do, and we're happy to work with any of the other organizations on that list or not on the list to just get this done so that it actually can happen, that it doesn't have to be perfect in order for it to work.
Could not agree with Deven more. Never underestimate reputational liability. Okay. I just want you to know these companies, I've spoken to many of them, even the big ones, they have a lot of reputational liability on the line if they do not deliver. So the people that are reaching out to me now and others, I'm not just saying me, but like because with the Karen Alliance stuff, we've been doing this for 7 years, right? And I'll just be candid. Some of these big companies have been in Karen Alliance for 7 years. And to Deven's point, have not brought the right people to the table. You know who I'm getting calls from now? Senior VPs, executive VPs who are in the chat responsible for the entire organization, the entire enterprises. And I literally, I won't say who it was. I'm literally like, I've been looking for you for 9 years, right? I've been relegated to somebody else. I wanted a decision maker at the organization. Guess what? I got him now. And they're like, I really want to meet with you this week. I'm all great. We'll give you all the ideas that we've been working on for 3 years, Deven,
Yeah.
Stephen, Dave, and I. Like, I mean, I'm just telling you and I'm not foreshadowing anything. I want to be really clear. But we do know that we do know a couple of things publicly that they've said. Number one, to Deven's point, there are hundreds of organizations that have pledged, okay, not just the 60. So stop whining that you were not in the White House event, okay? It just to Deven's point, the value the administration places is not people showing up to an event like this. It's actually getting the work done. Okay. So I would much rather be not attending the White House event and showing in January that I got the work done, because that event's going to be much better than even the one that the original signatory pledges, right, to do that. So that's point number one. Point number two is this administration likes public events. Like, can you imagine if in January or in April, the president is back on stage? Again, I'm just completely speculating, saying, well, we had 5 companies that actually did this, but we had 55 others that pledged. Where are they? Right? There's a public shaming perspective. Now, again, I'm not speculating on what they may or may not do. What I'm saying is these companies have a ton of reputational risk to be able to put their name out there and say, this is what we're going to do. I think they're very concerned about meeting those deadlines, to Deven's point. They've at least told me that. They're very, very concerned about it.
Mhm.
But by the way, rightly, they should. These companies can't move that fast. I mean, some of them are so large and they have other priorities that all of a sudden this got dropped on them, and you got to do it in 6 months after we've had our annual budget. Right now, you got to fund this stuff. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do, but you're pushing the industry to move at the speed that needs to be moved with. And this administration has shown they do want to get things done. Again, people are going to agree and disagree with what they're doing for sure, as rightly they should, but they are going to push to actually get it done. And they have a bias to action. And I think that's what we've all wanted for quite some time.
A couple of observations. One is we've been saying for years that we don't lack for the technology to get this done. What we've lacked for is the alignment of incentives. And this is a new type of incentive, this particular moment of political, energy. And it's an incentive that can promote really positive change in the world and in our industry, and for the benefit of all who receive healthcare. So I think it is a great opportunity. And I think all of our challenge is to channel that political incentive in a way that can actually help people get things done. We know it can be done. I mean, we've seen it in pandemics, we've seen it in natural disasters. We know that people can change priorities and get stuff done when they're appropriately incentivized. It's going to be very exciting to see that happen.
Yeah, indeed, and I think all of our organizations have pledged one way or another, and obviously there certainly is a that internal conversation of, okay, now what do we do? Okay, how do we actually make this happen? Let's analyze all the requirements. Let's really get down to brass tacks, and I'm sure we're not alone in going through that exercise. As we've gone through those details, there are a couple of things that stand out, I think, by their specificity in the Interop framework as it's proposed. One of them actually gets to Deven's point that she alluded to in passing about portalitis, where the Interop framework, while everything else is pretty generalized and directional, says more or less, thou shalt not require a portal login for allowing patients to get access to their records. That seems to me like a really interesting and helpful development to get past one of those what about objections that Deven also alluded to. Any thoughts on that requirement specifically?
It's great.
It is great. It is so, we've been all wanting this forever. I mean, Dave, you know, I could just riff on digital identity forever. What I would just say is that, look, the reason why this is so transformative is because all of your usernames and passwords are on the dark web. I think almost every day I'm getting another ping on another website saying, this password was compromised. Do you want to change it now? Right? So people need to get over the fact that the portal process today, especially chief security officers and others, and I think they are, I think the legal folks too, but username and password is not a secure way to authenticate in. What is a secure way is there's these IL2 credentials that validate that your actual true identity, right? It actually pings the driver's license, the DMV, for example, to make sure that you are who you say you are. It does this identity proofing process. It links it to your physical biometric. So even if someone actually took the username and password, they can't authenticate into a portal. I just spoke to a hospital system 2 weeks ago, Dave, who had a massive ransomware attack. Guess how it happened? Some nefarious actor called the call center, said, I'm Dr. Cassel. You know, I'd like to change my username and password. Here's my birth date and stuff that I stole from the the internet, the dark web. And here's all of my social security number. And I'd like to do it. They gave him a new username and password. He got into the network and had a whole ransomware attack. That happened. This is happening all over the country, by the way. So my point is, and by the way, it happened during the CARES Act money too. When the CARES Act money were being distributed, hundreds of billions of dollars to get people to get more money for unemployment insurance for those who are suffering during the pandemic. These states were dishing out this money, but they were doing it to nefarious actors, right? Nation states and all kinds of other stuff, billions of dollars of fraud. This is all well documented. And guess how it kind of ended or got curbed. And literally it was like this: identity credentials. Like, once I knew that Dave was who he says he was, I know that Dave's not a criminal anymore, or at least Dave's not going to come in twice to actually access his money. So now I can give it to him. Literally, the fraud went like this. It went like this, and then it literally went like this. And again, ID.me and others they're in 26 states. They've published about this. I'm just saying, like, we've got to do the same thing in healthcare. We got to stop paying money for ransomware attacks and be able to secure our systems better.
So, but Ryan, there is in the industry a very large group of folks who continue to say, without the portal credential, I'm not going to let you in. You know, and I know these people. They're my best friends. You know, I practice medicine with them, right? And there is a block of those folks, you know, who have been really in unison for years, and we have been up against this discussion of IL2 versus OAuth, you know, for a long time. And we've said, you know, it's been said by CMS agencies in the past, oh no, IL2 is fine. We're all going to do that. It's all required. And then lo and behold, it wasn't. You know, there was this little loophole in the phrasing of the rules that said, unless you have a local policy, in which case it's no big deal. And we've been stuck there. How do we get past that? I mean, CMS is the biggest, they've got the biggest carrots and the biggest sticks, right? Well, how do they use them here?
Well, so here's the thing. I actually, as important as like preventing fraud and the value proposition around an AAL2 digital credential around the fraud thing, I actually think the crux of the issue is more about the matching, right? Identity proofing does not guarantee, you know, only says, well, we're sure this is, I'm a lousy example because I have an unusual name. We're sure this is Ryan Howell, but we have a unique match from that query. But how do we really know that it's the right Ryan Howells in terms of the data that we're sending? And so therefore, if I know that Ryan Howells is logged into the portal, even if someone's stolen his credentials, I know that that is the data of the Ryan Howells that originally owns that portal, right? And so the matching issue is, in the view of many, better solved through requiring portal credentials, which is one of the reasons I think that you saw the big Epic announcement around their effort to create ways for patients to be able to log into one instance of MyChart, one provider's MyChart portal, and potentially see the data from their records of other Epic users. And given that Epic has a very big footprint in at least the hospital space with respect to electronic medical records, that's a good step forward. Does not satisfy the interoperability framework because you are still required to at least do one portal credential, and it's still early in the MyChart Central rollout. We don't know how many of their customers will adopt it. I know at least the two MyChart portals that I have, this capability is not available yet, and they're two pretty large systems. So we'll just sort of see. But the idea of the framework is, you know what? We're going to rely on those digital credentials, Ryan, that you just talked about, how valuable they are. And again, the value of the folks leaning in around all the objections that you talked about, Stephen. If any of your best friends who are talking about this are in that pledge, guess what? They're going to have to get over it. They're going to have to get over it.
And Deven, I thought you were going to cue the fact that it was a HIPAA violation not to give patients access to their. I thought that's where you're actually going to go because his best friends are, anyway, violating that. We can't set the bar too high in identity proofing. You got to have people have options, Stephen. So you got to provide the credential option. That's the portal option. And we're just saying give them another option. That's all we're saying. Give them another option of identity proofing that allows them to authenticate using that same credential across multiple portals. That's all we're saying. And by the way, they did studies on this too. A third of Americans want to use their portal credential. A third want to use a private sector credentialing service provider. And a third want to use a government like login.gov. So give them options. All three, right? Just have the ability to do that. That's all we're saying, Stephen. And so that's the point, is like, how do we make sure that people have those options to do it? Last thing, just a friendly amendment to Deven's. I agree 100% with what she said. The only thing I'd say is that is absolutely the problem today because you're matching against existing patients with existing records. That is absolutely it. We've been working on it, as Deven knows, with her help for like 2+ years with ONC and OCR. What I would say is, though, if we start afresh and say I'm a new patient in a new system, right? And I do an identity-proofed login because I'm online registering, and then that is those are the demographics you use to then be able to match me going forward, and I have the Enterprise Master Patient Index number connected to that event, we don't have that problem downstream. And over time, what will happen is we don't have that matching problem long-term either for that patient. So as you can see, each patient goes in each new health system, they do the online registration flow, and that allows that to be able to be done. And so over time it goes away, not immediately. And I totally again agree with Deven. The matching issues we got to solve, but the matching logic stays the same, Stephen. It stays the same. Nope, we're not saying change the matching logic, right? Each of the organizations have their own risk tolerance level for what they believe is a match. We're saying keep that today. We're just saying we're going to give you the right answer. You just tell us if the demographics in your system matches with the right answer 100% of the time.
Well, I agree, but I am really intrigued by this notion of federated OAuth because I know Dave and I were in the room when we started that conversation a couple of years ago with the vendor you mentioned, and I think it's a great step forward. But the focus, of course, of the way it's being rolled out is it's for patient portal access. It's not about FHIR access. It's not about using apps. It's not about providers sharing data. My sense of it, I wasn't in the room for the announcement, but is that it's very much focused on I as a patient. For me, I think I've got 5 MyCharts, right, in different organizations, and the idea that I could log into one and get into the others. You can already up to a certain point, but you certainly don't integrate the data the way that a MyChart Central is going to offer that. But how do we move that concept of federated OAuth into this model? I mean, is it just patient is still choosing I want to do OAuth. I don't want to do IAL2. I think that notion, Ryan, that you shared of you give the patient the choice. In a sense, you're asking them to say they're opting in or out of using IAL2 at an individual level. We know that opt-in processes scale very, very slowly if you're asking individuals to make that choice. How do we get this to scale, with the kind of time frame that CMS is encouraging?
Yeah, I just quickly, we're way into the weeds. I don't know if we've lost the audience, Dave, but like we'll get Dave to correct us. But like the quick answer is the way that the MyChart Central is going to work. We talked Epic this week, actually. I don't know, but maybe it's not supposed to be public, but now it is, Dave, on InteropChat. So there we go. Is that you still need to get a portal credential at each provider site for them to link it. So it's not the OIDC trust one credential, federate all that we're all dreaming about. And there's practical reasons why. I just want to be clear. The practical reasons are exactly what Deven mentioned, which is if we don't get the matching right, we're going to be in trouble across the systems, and the provider systems are going to be held liable potentially for that. So we have some more work to do to get true federated OIDC, OAuth in place. And again, I want to go back to Devin's point. Like the fact that these companies said, yeah, we're in and we want to figure it out is a big, fat, hairy deal. And I get frustrated when people, and I'm sorry, but for political reasons or from, whatever reasons, they're like, this is just a press release or it's just, it's a good PR stunt. I'm like, this is much, much more for all of us that have been doing this for so long. And we all have widespread different political beliefs. This is a moment in time where like, let's take advantage of this. We've all been doing this for way, way too long. And let's figure out a way where we can just rally behind this issue and get it done in the next 3.5 years, right? All these things. I mean, we're going to talk about, we could talk about digital quality measurement. We could talk about all this stuff that we're doing that is just painstaking and brain damaging, okay? Like that, why are we spending hundreds of billions of dollars on revenue cycle management and manual quality measurement reporting, like just stupid stuff when we could fix this in 3.5 years and hopefully the next 3.5 years. And we don't know when this window is going to open again. It may open in the next administration. I don't know. But that's my point. It's like this is a rallying cry for the industry and with the government's full support. Let's take advantage of it.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point, let's shift gears a little bit. So we've been focusing on the patient-facing aspects of the interoperability framework. You alluded earlier, though, Ryan, as you were introducing it, to getting B2B FHIR in place. And I think while there is a lot of attention, including in the actual Slack channels that you referred to on the patient side of it, it may turn out that the most transformative aspect ends up being the B2B FHIR. All will all become clear, I guess, when it happens. But one important aspect of that is moving beyond simply shifting CCD exchange between providers to now use FHIR, which has value, to be clear. There's value in doing that. But it's not transformative. Whereas what would be transformative is what is envisioned in the Interop framework explicitly, that providers and payers will make data available to one another. What is our thought on payers and providers coming together in harmony under the Interop framework, and how is that going to be different in this context than it has been in previous attempts to do this over the past 10, 15 years in the interoperability world?
I mean, I think the real question is, will CMS provide a financial incentive? That a financial
They can't
incentive
do
from
it through this,
CMS.
can't do it through the interoperability framework. That takes rulemaking, that takes effort. They haven't put that on the table. There's just the sort of soft incentives that we've talked about.
Well, I heard a rumor a couple of weeks ago about 72-hour payment, right? I mean, that was floated somewhere in one of the
Interesting.
CMS meetings, right? And it's like that would change everything in healthcare. If
Well, let me clarify your quote rumor, Stephen. It's public information, so I can say it. But there is a webinar that Medicare actually did recently, Chris Klomp, where his concept is how can Medicare fee-for-service pay you faster? That was the rumor. And now it's, I think, 14 days. They're trying to actually cut that in half. Now, and it's basically like, how do we figure out a way to get you paid faster? So that's the quote carrot that's out there. That's one thing. The second thing, to just react to Dave's question, as you guys know, we've been doing this One Utah Digital Health Collaborative work for like 2 years, and it's the largest B2B FHIR pilot in the whole country. And it's got multiple payers, multiple providers, and the state of Utah, including Medicaid and public health, that are in this group. And we've been meeting, it's a governor-led initiative. So it's a requirement from them. And we had federal folks there at the kickoff. Like, it's got a lot of attention and the right people in the room. We've been meeting every other week for 2 years, Stephen, and we're still not in production. Okay. We are still testing. Why? Because when we started, we had to explain what the 0057 rule was, right? That took a few months. This was 2 years ago, right? Then we had to say, we had to battle against my EHR is going to do everything for me, right? I don't need to stand up my own API gateway. So then they were like, once we convinced them that no, you actually do need your own API gateway, then they had to go procure for one, then they had to buy one, then install one, right? Some are still in the process of doing that. And now they're actively testing, and we're hoping later this year, early next year, we'll be in production. That is a focused biweekly effort that we have in Utah. I'm a very optimistic person, as you guys know, but like what makes me very pessimistic is, to Dave's point, payers and providers don't just like randomly just hang around and have lunch together, right? Like that, they are at each other's throat during annual contract negotiations, as you guys know, sending evil press releases back and forth saying how horrible each of them are and shutting down all communication with each other while they go through this public relations fight for whatever it is, 7 months, and then they get back together again. I'm just being kind of real with people, right? Then they get back together again. Okay, everything's great, hunky dory, let's go back to work, right? And that happened in a few states that we're aware of. But here's my point. My point is, we've got like 17 months left, right? And how is this going to just randomly happen? How are we going to be able to figure out a way? Because this is hard stuff, right? E-prior authorization is a hard thing in that 0057 rule. And try to get the workflow right. Who's the QHIN we're going to use? How do we actually navigate the attribution requirements? All that stuff is super hard. We think, and I think we're somewhat on an island on this perspective, that we've got to start small. We've got to start like at a state level, back to the point, and be able to choose like one QHIN, almost like an HIE model, but it's a QHIN-like model, and just say, let's get Utah stood up, and then let's go get Arizona stood up. Stephen, we're not going to touch California with a 10-foot pole yet because it's just so complicated. And you got that data exchange framework. But like, what are the states we want to do? And then we can scale it nationally, right? Then we can figure it out. But I don't think payment and operations on TEFCA, well, we can talk about that later, is going to be a thing anytime in the near future, in the next 3 to 5 years. We're going to have to figure that out. But go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, just wanting to react and give a little bit of context to some of the things you were saying there, for those who maybe aren't intimately familiar with all the acronyms and numbers. So Ryan was alluding to a CMS rule 0057F that requires a number of different types of APIs. It builds on the requirements of a previous rule 9115 that required payers to provide access to members to their information. 0057 builds on that from a member access standpoint to a certain extent, but what in my view anyway is most transformative about 0057 is, as Ryan alluded to, the introduction of API requirements around the prior authorization process, which I think all of us in our roles as patients and members know is just a nightmare. Enough said about prior auth from that standpoint. So let's make it better. I think every universal, bipartisan, payers and providers, I think literally everyone agrees that it can be improved and that there's benefits to all parties by improving it. And getting access through APIs to some ability to do prior auth related functions electronically is I'm not interpreting the policy really. Don't speak for CMS, but seems to be the obvious goal of 0057F. the importantly, and this starts to blend into what Ryan was just saying, the CMS rule just says you shall make these APIs available. It doesn't say really anything, first of all, about providers actually using the APIs, nor does it say anything about how you scale the deployment of these APIs so that it's actually functional. So it's arguably a starting point that maybe needs a little bit more on top of it. Ryan was alluding to the potential, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it sounded like with your reference to QHINs, you were alluding to the potential for TEFCA to serve as a trust framework that supports the scaling of the use of CMS 0057 APIs. Is that so? I'll let you. I'll pause there just with that background and let you react to that.
So I was advocating for the use of a TEFCA-like model to scale e-prior authorization, at least at a regional or state-based basis first before we go national. That's what I was advocating for. So the Utah model, just really quickly, that we've established is we selected eHealth Exchange, we meaning the collective group. So we love Health Gorilla, Dave. It was just like the group just wanted to do this. And so we said, okay, we did, and they were FHIR enabled, et cetera. They were ready to go 2 years ago. So we said, okay, let's do that. And but most of them had signed on to eHealth Exchange too. So there were all kinds of reasons for it. And we said, okay, let's do that. And let's do a TEFCA-like model, because here's the key thing with e-prior auth. We can do this wrong or we can do it right. The wrong way is massive portals for providers, and they've still got to log into 20 different provider portals, because the rule basically says if every payer goes off and does their own thing, you're going to have 20 different portals again. And it's not going to be no good, no better than what we have today. And the problem on the payer side is that they still get the calls and faxes. And the problem on the patient side is they don't get real-time responses. Okay, so you're going to still have the same problem if we go to the new stuff. The TEFCA-like model, why it's better, at least at a regional basis, is the provider gets a single user interface because they can choose any client app that they want. It gets routed to eHealth, a QHIN, like a QHIN-like entity, and they can route the information to the different payers so that the provider still has a single user interface. Drop down, Steven selects his payer of choice, enters the same questionnaire, sends it over, gets a real-time response. Patient actually gets the information before they leave the office. That's the power. Payers don't get the calls and faxes, reduces their costs. Patient gets a real-time answer. That's what we really want, right? So what I'm saying is, I think, and we're having discussions like a dozen different states right now, I think we need more of these models faster. Like, I think we need, whatever group wants to get together to do this stuff, and it's definitely not going to all be us. Whoever wants to kind of be convening, get the payers, providers in a room, select your QHIN model, and get this stuff up and running in the next 16 months. That's what I'd love to do, to try to make this actually work, at least initially, on a local basis, and then we can figure it out nationally.
The problem, of course, with having 1,000 or 50 flowers bloom is that then getting everybody back onto a national standard can be very difficult. But I think that if we are evolving the framework within TEFCA to be able to do this in a standardized way, and there can be that convergence where each process is informed by the other, that we might be able to run that gauntlet.
Yeah, I mean, I think Deven certainly want to give you a chance to react as well, but just briefly, I think there's, in some places the state may be a good place to set up a boundary. You have to set some boundary, right? To your point, Ryan, if you just try to say, hey, Acme Health Plan, you need to allow access immediately to every provider across the country, and when you flip this switch in your system, oh, by the way, that's exactly what's going to happen. That causes consternation, and the same thing, if not even more so, on the provider side, to say, hey, flip this switch, and all of a sudden you're going to be sharing a bunch of data with Acme Health Plan and every other health plan that's out there. I think we all want to get there, but it just isn't where people are at. That said, there may be, and this is a long way to go to get to this conclusion. I don't want there to be an implication that the state is the only boundary that you might set. I mean, there could be a set of large health systems that are multi-state who coordinate with payers who have plans in every state, or well, not every state, but the relevant states. I could see something like that happening as well that isn't state-oriented, but still is bounded by the coalition of the willing in this case.
I hadn't really thought about the prompt payment incentive. Um, and frankly, if some of the health plans, or if not all of the health plans that are signatories to the pledge, did provided that kind of incentive, even if they just did it for a handful of their provider customers, maybe some of the providers that are also leaning in the framework as just an example to show, with a little bit of sweetener, and some provisions around, look, payers are allowed to get data under HIPAA, but there's always been like that friction around, I don't want to send the health plan all my data. I don't want to, and are the health plans frankly asking for more data than they should be? There's always been that tension, and solving this problem is obviously a benefit to providers and how they manage their bottom lines in their businesses. But it's also, as we've talked about, hugely beneficial to patients, because ultimately the patients are the ones who suffer when there isn't the authorization for something that they need, or they're declined, and the appeals process can be quite a nightmare. And even among those of us who've done it, who have a fair degree of sophistication about the healthcare system, it can take months. For somebody who's really sick, that's a horrible answer. It's not an answer. It's another symptom of just how horrible our healthcare system can be, to sick patients in particular. So a little bit of sweetener could go a long way. Otherwise, I think you're right that we are sort of running up against a lot of mistrust, sort of some entrenched obstacles. I'm not sure that solving it state by state, with all due praise for the effort going on in Utah, you guys are geographically large, but population small,
And very
compared to other parts
homogeneous.
of the country, and maybe even more. You have an ability to maybe bring people together with it. There's more than maybe someplace like New York or California or Michigan, or yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. Well, Devin, I live in Georgia, not Utah, but like,
Right. but
what,
but you have some heart in Utah, so
that's
I
right.
get
We have
it.
some heart. I've children in Utah too. But what I would say is, I don't want to do it in 50 states either. I really don't, Devin. Like that, I would much rather have a national approach to this thing. No one has been able to explain to me how you do payment and operations on national TEFCA first. And the reason why and Devin, you and I have talked about this extensively, is that every payer and provider have their own data use agreement for specific use cases that they have negotiated as part of their contract, their annual contract, their fees that they yell at each other about.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
they have these data use agreements for specific purposes. This is the population you're going to take risk on. This is the data you're going to receive. And they're all going to abandon that and just accept the flow downs on the common agreement and just say, we're all
Well,
hunky
the law
now.
lets them. The law lets them, by the
Well,
way.
the law lets them, but does their business model let them? Like, do
Mhm.
they want to do that? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, are the lawyers going to agree to that after they've negotiated every point of that contract? I'm just saying, I can't see a way to do it nationally. And if I, I so hope I'm wrong, by the way, on this answer, but I just want to stop the fallacy that national TEFCA payment operations on national TEFCA is going to be a thing. I've talked to way too many people now privately who don't want to go public with this because sometimes their businesses are affected by it, but like have told me they don't see a way to do it either. And they
Mm.
haven't figured out a way to do it. I'm telling this group that's watching, maybe the 6 people. No, I'm kidding, Dave. Whoever's watching this now or still, I think, like, give us an answer for that question. If you have an answer to that question, I will be the first one to publicize it and say, here's how we do it, because we're trying to figure out an answer for it nationally, and there is no answer for it today. I just want to be super clear with people. As much as we're, you know, want to do it, it's not something we can do practically. That's the problem.
I have always been one of those most optimistic maybe about this, but I have gradually, maybe it's old age, but that I'm just becoming a curmudgeon. But I've now come around to your way of thinking, Ryan, that there are really deep challenges for this. I don't, never say never, right? I do think that ultimately we can get there, but it's a long process, really long process. And I think we're going to all have to be satisfied with some baby steps. It will be interesting to see how the pledge community, the CMS interop framework community reconciles their pledge with these internal business drivers that we've been talking about. And one way that I think is reasonable for them to approach it would be for there to be, whether it's statewide or just kind of between some other organized coalition of the willing, maybe even including payers and providers in California, they end up moving forward with some aspect of this. Maybe it's easier for payers to wrap their heads around payer to payer aspects of it first. And as has been shown, providers have gotten over their initial hesitations, and provider to provider exchange generally works pretty well today. That was, people maybe accept that as just a given. It was definitely not a given, circa 2005, 2006, when we were first trying to do this in different parts of the industry, and it took years. I remember when I was part of the effort to develop the Epic Care Everywhere network, and we solved the technical problems in about 5 or 6 months. We had a solution that was ready to be deployed. And it was deployed, I want to say, maybe 2.5, 3 years later, because we just had to get providers that got past this notion of, oh my goodness, you mean I have to share this data with anyone any provider, not anyone, just any provider. And it wasn't even any provider, it was any Epic customer who had also signed on to the same terms. This was not a wide open set of organizations, and it still took 2 or 3 years for
Yeah,
that to.
as you say, even with all of that, it was a really big leap for our organizations to get on board with that. It took
Yeah.
years.
So I think we need to be pragmatic about the business model drivers, and maybe give a little bit of space for the payer community to go through that same evolution that the providers went through, while at the same time obviously doing everything we can to accelerate the process. And it's just going to be an interesting balance to achieve all of that. Um, we've mentioned a few times TEFCA in this conversation, and Stephen, I know that you remain pretty closely involved in that. It was not too long ago that there were a lot of questions about, was TEFCA even going to continue to be a thing? That appears to have been resolved, and it just occurred to me to check the time, and we are running up against time. But just really briefly, maybe to tee us up for our next conversation the next time we get together, what are some of the latest developments in TEFCA? How does the future look from your perspective?
I mean, I think you're right. There was a pause. It was unclear as the new administration came in how TEFCA was going to be supported and encouraged moving forward. I think there's still a bit of confusion because of this parallel universe between the CMS effort and the existing TEFCA effort. But all signs point to full steam ahead. That there was a pause while things got reorganized, and Steve Posnack and the head of ASTP, and others are saying yes, we're going ahead. So new QHINs are being designated, new standard operating procedures are being contemplated. The SSA is very involved in helping to move forward government benefits determination. So it does move at a different pace. We're not talking about by 4th of July we're going to have specific announcements. But I really took to heart the comments that Steve made about, there's the what we're trying to accomplish, and there's the how we're actually going to do it at scale. And I think it jives very much with what Ryan has said, that we're back to the old HIE days. A lot of this exchange is local, whether you're talking about provider to provider, payer to provider, that we can do regional pilots so long as we're leveraging the technology that we all see as appropriate, and see that converge over time. I think we may find that sweet spot between moving fast and moving really deliberatively, but it seems to be moving ahead. And I think that would be a good topic next time. And
Yeah.
I got my first patient waiting, so I'm going to have to run.
Yes, the time flies when you're having fun. It did not actually occur to me that we had already been going for the full time. But really appreciate everybody joining. It was a wonderful conversation as always. Hopefully, an informative one as well. So thanks everyone for watching, and thanks to our group here for participating. Take care, everyone.